In this video, we're going to do a basic compare and contrast of CSS Float versus CSS Flexbox. Okay, so I have this basic image gallery set up here, and if we make the browser a bit more narrow, you'll see that we change our rows and columns. Okay, so we have a basic responsive gallery. All right, so if we were to look, or let's go ahead and look at the code, and you'll just see that I have a section that is going to hold the gallery images. Each image is inside of a div. Each div is being given a class float slide. Okay, so if we go and look at our CSS and we look at float slide, the important part here is I'm using float left clear none. And what this is doing is, let's go back to our gallery, is basically we are removing these elements, these div elements, from the normal flow of the document. They normally should be stacked up, but the float property is saying start on the left hand side and float these elements until you run out of room. When you run out of room, start to draw the next element. And the clear none means that this item isn't going to clear the one before it and this one before that, which would mean this element would be taken out of the flow of the document and, out of the float, the current float sequence, and then it would move down to the row underneath. Okay, now one of the things that we run into with floats, if we go back to our source code here, is you'll notice on my section I have a clearfix. Okay, so if I go and look at my styles, actually my main interface, I've got a lot of styles here, and I'll go all the way down to the bottom. I have what is called a clearfix. This is a hack which basically gets your elements to come back into the normal flow of the document. Well, what does that mean? Let's go to our source code, and I'm going to remove clearfix here. So I'm just going to cut this. And let's go ahead and save, and let's take a look. And do you see how the footer has come up? Do you see how this background that is holding our gallery has collapsed? That's because these floats are out of the normal flow of the document, which means this element, okay, this section has no idea they are there. So what we've had to do in the past, if I go back, and let's just take a look at our main interface. What we have to do is this little trick where we clear both. Otherwise, we bring a clear in, and this will get the normal flow of the document back. So the element will believe or behave as if the float items are normal block level elements and not removed from the flow of the document. So that's sort of a hack that we had to go through. So I'm going to go back to my source code, and let's add our clearfix back and save. And we'll take a look again real quickly, and we should see that our document flow is returned. Okay, so an example of using floats to get elements to be removed from the normal flow of the document, otherwise these divs being stacked up, and allowing these divs to act like inline block elements like images. And that way they can continue to draw until they run out of space, and then they'll drop down to the next row and begin drawing. All right, let's take a look at another example here, and that would be flex. So here's my flex. And we should have the same section right here, okay? And this has a class intro. And then you'll notice I have a div inside, and this div is holding the divs, which are the individual slides. Okay, and you'll notice now I'm calling this flex slide. All right, so I don't believe I was calling them flex slides before. I was calling them float slides. All right, so I'm giving each of these a class called flex slide. These are all inside of a div, which we call flex container. So let's look at flex CSS. And you'll see that we have flex container, display flex, flex wrap, wrap, and I believe that's it. Okay, so instead of using floats and clears, we're now telling the element that is holding all of our images to be a flex element, and to set those elements or allow those elements to wrap. So if we go ahead and take a visual look, we are now taking a look at the flex version, and we know we're in the flex version because it says so right here. Okay, this uses the flex version, and when we make this narrow, it's going to behave. So our image gallery is going to behave exactly the same as with our floats. So there's not a big difference between using floats and clears and using Flexbox if you're making a really simple image gallery. But if you're going to start changing, or you want the heights of the elements to all be consistent, or if you want to be able to target certain elements, or you want to quickly be able to deal with the space around the elements, the space between the elements, or where these elements begin to draw, or how they're aligned both horizontally and vertically, that becomes very, very challenging with floats. But it's very, very easy to do with CSS Flex. All right, so a sort of a compare and contrast between CSS Floats and Clears and CSS Flex. We now know that when you keep an image gallery simple, or a layout simple, they both will be effective strategies. But once you have layouts that become more complex, then CSS Flex is much, much more versatile and friendly.